All right, guys, everybody welcome. My name is Brian Beckham, and I'm giving a talk today using platforms at enterprise scale. We're going to talk about how accelerators are being used by large enterprise clients and the challenges that comes up with for teams that are hoping to get in the mix and actually do some of those projects. Before we get started, I want to kind of set your expectations. This talk is going to suck. It's going to be horrible. All right, I haven't rehearsed it. I've never seen it. I've never done it. Entirely unique. We'll see what happens. Okay. As much as I would like to be, talking about things like unit testing or personalization, I saw somebody did a robot. That's not going to happen. This is really about stuff that we deal with practically every day in Sitecore and some of the clients and the projects that we've been doing. Sitecore has been very successful at selling licenses to some big clients, and these clients bring not tens or 20s or hundreds of projects, but literally thousands of web projects. And they introduce a tremendous amount of complexity in how they deliver and what their expectations are. We've had a lot of fortune to be able to work with a lot of these clients. And we've seen a lot of partners enter these ecosystems and experience a lot of operational issues. So my hope today is that I can share with you some of those stories, and I can give you an opportunity, or your partnership an opportunity, to do something with these types of clients and be successful. So our agenda, I will say this, I did give this presentation deck to our designers at some point last week, and they rewrote all my slides, they threw all my bullets away, and they put a lot of pictures on there, so I have no idea what we're going to get, but it should be a little bit interesting. The agenda is very light. All right, we're going to have some time for questions at the end. And for now, we'll just go ahead and get started. So first question, all right, this is obviously a little bit awkward. I don't know any of you. I know a couple of you, but I don't know many of you. How many people in the room are developers? Okay, let me ask the other question. How many people are not developers? Oh my gosh, like 4. Okay, well, that's good. All right, so how many of you work for a Sitecore technology partner? All right, so most of the developers work, and how many of you work for customers, for Sitecore customers? All right, so a little bit of a mix of both. All right, that's very good. So you are definitely my type of audience. That's fantastic. So let me share a little bit about myself, and then we can get off to hopefully a quick start. So as stated, my name is Brian Beckham. I founded a company called BrainJocks out of the United States. We're located in Atlanta, Georgia. We also have an office, a subsidiary here in Europe, in Novi Sad, called BrainJocks Europe. Very talented group of engineers, and you can see by this, we maintain a very strict code of hair. Everybody has to shave their head and drink, and that's very important to us. So really, all kidding aside, our Europe team, very skilled group of engineers, very successful group. Been really happy with their performance. I'm very excited to be in Europe and actually leave the airport in Amsterdam instead of just passing through there. So a little bit about me. I started my career as a network architect at IBM. And a long time ago, that meant something totally different than it means right now. I am fairly old. After I left IBM, I joined a university, the Georgia Institute of Technology in Atlanta, as an instructor for the College of Computing. So we started BrainJocks in December of 1997. As you can tell, I had hair when it started. I don't have it now. It was an interesting time. But I started a company as an engineer, so I guess I'm what you would refer to as an engineering entrepreneur. Now I'm the CEO of the company, and my days have changed a lot. As opposed to being focused on software development and engineering tasks, now my job is to make sure that our teams have a chance to be successful in the company. I still maintain the title of Chief Technology Officer, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the engineering challenges and the things that we do at BrainJocks. But really, now, I'm much more focused on making sure that every project we complete on time, on budget, and with a happy client. When our project started years and years ago, again, I'm really old, right? So it was silly things like, the browser wars. Hey, does it work on Internet Explorer? Does it work on Netscape? I mean, does it do whatever? It was a different ecosystem. Things were a lot simpler. When a project went sideways, well, let me ask you guys this question. Who's had a project go bad in your lifetime? The rest of you are liars. I swear you're liars. So you know that you had projects go bad. Everybody's had projects go bad. At some point in everybody's career, that does happen. And what I noticed just through observation is that there was this kind of constant theme, all right? I called it the Bermuda Triangle of Doom, right? The Triangle of Doom. And really what it boiled down to is when a project started to fade, it became a finger-pointing exercise, all right? So start with the engineers, all right? We are the engineers. We would say things like, the customer didn't give us good requirements. You all said that. We would all say things like, well, the creative gave us a design that the technology won't exactly do. All right, we've all said that too. And then the creative people would say, the engineers are idiots. And the customer would say, the engineers are idiots. So at the end of it, we were the blame, right? Because we were the end of the chain. We were the ones that actually held the responsibility of delivering this project on time, on budget, and successfully. And when it doesn't happen, well, the comps look good. Why didn't the website look like the comps? All right? Why didn't it behave like I thought it would? Why didn't it work like I thought it would? Now, let's talk about accelerators for a moment. Accelerators are a big topic of this conference, big topic in Sitecore land for sure. With the release of Sitecore's SXA, this is a very hot topic right now. But that's not the first accelerator, right? Now, there's other products that are on the market. Things like Keystone. Proficient has a thing called Ignition. But just let me ask this question to the people that are engineers and that are partners. Which of you have been doing Sitecore for more than 4 years? Okay. Of those companies, which of you have your own accelerator? Okay. Accelerators are nothing new. Companies have had accelerators for a very long time. Sometimes those accelerators are things that are just used internally. They weren't productized, they weren't sold to market to other competitors, they weren't sold directly to clients. It was something that you used in order to deliver and build Sitecore. All right, so why did you use it? Well, the reason that you used it is because you wanted to have a very predictable path of delivery of Sitecore. You wanted to have some governance in terms of how your developers actually did it, and you really did want to accelerate them a little bit. Sitecore was designed intentionally to be extremely extensible. Okay, they don't give you a page template to start off with. They didn't give you a collection of components or renderings. They didn't give you, really even force you into making a specific authoring experience. I worked with a ton of partners, and I've seen a bunch of projects throughout the last several years in Sitecore. And one thing I can tell you for certain, if you give two different teams or two different companies the same task, the same raw materials, the same information, what they come out with will be completely different, all right? Because there isn't one right way to do something in Sitecore. You almost certainly get an implementation that will have strengths and weaknesses, but how they can be different is very significant. It's not just in the code and how it's written. It's in things like the authoring experience, the content tree architecture, okay? Significant differences in how it's operated. One person that's taught to use one of those solutions might not even know how to use the other one. All right, so standards were a little bit of an issue. Now, in addition to the authoring experience, it's also about how a team executes. If you start from scratch on every single Sitecore project, how you create the basic things like metadata in your pages, or how you define your renderings, or what your layout document looks like in your placeholders might be entirely different. If there is no uniformity to it, and if you leave it to the engineering team to make all of those kind of basic decisions on their own, then the results that you get, again, will be very different. Okay, so at BrainJocks we did the same thing. Okay, years and years ago, we built our own accelerator, and it is now known as BrainJocks Score. The original problem that we were trying to address was governance. We wanted our teams to execute in a similar fashion. We wanted our teams to create things that were supportable, and we wanted to make sure they avoided the pitfalls of development. Now, this is kind of a weird topic now, but back in the day, when I first became an MVP in 2012, not everybody implemented the page editor, right? Or the visual experience editor, whatever it's called. All right, so not everybody did it. All right, so and unless you architected the system a certain way, you may not be able to take advantage of it. So when those customers reached that next level of maturity and they wanted to use marketing automation, they want to use personalization MVTs, they couldn't. So we wanted to make sure that they avoided those kind of pitfalls. Now, we productized SCORE in 2014, actually at Sitecore's request, right? We went into Symposium and we put up a booth and we decided to see what happens. And SCORE today is being used by some of Sitecore's largest clients, right? So Procter & Gamble is probably our largest at this point, but it's also being used by other companies like Vistaprint, Honeywell, Kraft, Heinz. These are the companies that aren't trying to build one site, it's the companies that are trying to build several thousands of websites. So the enterprise. Now, when I talk about enterprise organizations, what I'm really talking about are these companies that are massively big, okay? And what they are is they're organized into brands, okay? These are referred to as a mission-oriented organization, but functionally they're different. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So let me give you an idea of scale, all right? Procter & Gamble has well over 100,000 employees. They currently offer 65 different brands. The only reason it's only 65 is because they divested over 100 brands in 2015, and their revenue is somewhere around $65 billion a year. The number of websites that they currently maintain and house, somewhere between 12 and 1,500, I'm not sure the exact number, and they want to build. They want to recycle those websites every 36 months. So if you do a quick calculation of velocity, how many websites do they have to produce every year? A lot, all right, a lot. No one vendor can get it done. No one team obviously can get it done. It's really an unprecedented velocity expectation, right? But that's why they bought Sitecore in the first place. They wanted to have a common way to deliver. They wanted to have something that they could churn these websites out very quickly. And that was their expectation. Now, one of my books as the CEO that I read and that I ask my management team to read is a book called High Output Management by Andrew Grove. And he defines kind of different organizational structures. And an enterprise is what's referred to as a hybrid organization. So services that are centralized, like IT operations, technical delivery, those things are what are referred to as functional groups. Okay? Then they're mission-oriented on the other hand, which they give brands autonomy to be able to execute. Not every enterprise company is organized the same, but in general, they do try to create a group that specializes in the delivery of web applications in Sitecore. So they want uniformity out of how that is delivered. Okay? So these functional organizations centralize services to leverage them across the company and to make them as low cost as they possibly can. Now, the analogy here is to create a factory, a website factory. So they want to take advantage of that commonality. They want to take advantage of the investment in Sitecore. They want to make sure that they can create a training module for authoring, that they have a standard way of dealing with things like multi-tenancy, that they have a standard in the company about how to deal with publishing and workflow. So when they create that training module for the authors, they can hand it to all the new teams that are using without redeveloping a new training system every time, and that company or that brand will be able to deliver. They also need to deal with the developer methodology. So what happens when I create an event handler in an instance of Sitecore? All right, every tenant can see it. So if I don't begin to implement things like governance or to have some strategy of how I'm going to use that instance, then I can create a lot of problems between different teams that are executing potentially for different brands. It also impacts design methodology. Now, we got to be very careful here because the enterprise does not want a bunch of cookie cutter websites. They want to be able to deliver things that are, from a user experience standpoint, very distinct. However, they will have branding and design guidelines. Okay, so again, we have all these kind of challenges. Right? They look for this uniformity in terms of how it's delivered, but they don't want uniformity in how it looks and how it feels. Now, so accelerators, what they do is they give us a clear path of execution. They solve a lot of these problems. They tell us how we're going to develop with Sitecore, and they also create an expectation for content authoring. All right, they each give you kind of this prescription of how content authoring should work. One thing that we got to be really careful about is what we refer to as the myth of the website in a box. And that is really a grisly picture, but what I mean by that is that if I go out and I buy an accelerator, it's not going to allow me just to build a website by installing it, okay? Every accelerator is meant to give you a boost. It's meant to get you part of the way. And if the development team follows the methodology of that accelerator, it does create that consistency that we want in between those teams. Now, so sometimes the customer will have that expectation, oh, all I have to do is install SCORE, install SXA, and then I can drag and drop and I can build my websites. No matter how complex, no matter how capable, will allow you to build these websites out of the box. They are all going to require customizations. Why? Well, what about things like integration points? What about things like that customer CRM system? What about things like specific user experience and design elements that framework is not going to do out of the box? All companies are going to request and require these things. All right, so we have to be prepared for it. And for us in this room, it's important that we understand how these companies wish to deliver it. So now we define a new term. We define a term that we'll call the enterprise platform. Down at the bottom, we would have Sitecore plus some accelerator. And again, that accelerator is going to give us a basic set of services, a basic opinion about authoring, a basic opinion about development practices and about code organization, deployment units, solution structures, etc. And then on top of that, they're going to start laying in things that are specific to their strategy, okay, and their technology base. So as an example, Procter & Gamble has a number of brands, and they have different strategies for delivery of sites. So they have a set of sites that are referred to as brand websites. And those brand websites have products, product information. They're very search-driven, in other words. They have other sites that are more community-based. They're a coupon delivery mechanism. They do other things. Different type of sites, different type of strategy, different IA, different management type, different et cetera. But what they do is they take all those pieces of services that they need. For the product sites, it's going to be things like product variations, ratings and reviews, Solr-based search, or Coveo-based search, or whatever it ends up being. And they'll go ahead and package component layers, services, and features that fit into those requirements. Things that the accelerator will not provide, so another layer of services that will sit on top of it. And this we refer to, again, as an enterprise platform. Now, the accelerator is very important, but the platform fills in the gaps. Okay? Now, in the work that we have done, we have worked a lot with a few companies. All right, Procter & Gamble is definitely the one we've had the deepest engagement with over time. They were literally the first customer that bought BrainJocks SCORE. They came up to us at the booth. They said, this is what we want. We met with them and went forward. But each of these companies that I have on the board here have all taken the same exact strategy. Procter & Gamble has a platform they refer to as .com, codenamed Blue Box. All right, but it captures all those elements. Kraft Heinz has a platform they refer to as Recipes. Okay, they're currently in the process of migrating that over to BrainJocks SCORE. And Honeywell has one referred to as Rapid Flexible Web Framework. They really like acronyms. RFWF. Same concept, but each one of them employs a different strategy, and each one of them employs different user experience requirements. Each one of them has different delivery mechanism. They have different hosting mechanisms. All right, so it allows them to capture those things that are specific to how they do business and how they work and how they deliver inside of that box. Now, one thing that is very important to understand is that even those companies that take this approach of delivering an enterprise platform, you still don't get to the website in a box. It doesn't happen. Why? Because design. It's those damn designers. They keep designing things. If you give a designer a clean sheet of paper, Lord help us all. They're going to give us something back in design that absolutely will require some level of customization. Otherwise, your website starts looking at cookie cutters, all right? So we don't want that to happen. So we still have to have a way that each individual project or brand can deliver specific user experience and possibly integration points. And these enterprises all have to have that. Now, I have seen an occasion where a company really tried to go for the website in a box. And what I can tell you is it was a huge failure. It was a massive problem. Because every time the designers would design something, the developers would push back and say, no, that can't be done with our layer of components and services. It cannot be done. So they would go back to design, and it would become this point of friction between them. And this company, and I'm not going to mention who it is, literally took a team of creative directors from the United States and from North America overall and flew them to India to sit down with an engineering team to understand why they couldn't align on how to deliver and how to work. And what it was every time they started to put in customizations, they would have to add something into this big enterprise library, which would have this huge ripple effect to all of their servers, all their instances. And it caused them a tremendous amount of operational friction. So there will be a solution for each project. You will still have an opportunity to develop. At the very least, it's going to be CSS. All right, but more than likely, it's going to be a lot more than that. When we look at projects, we look at this kind of as a spectrum of two extremes. On one extreme is, I want to be able to build a site kind of as out of the box as I can, right? I want to be able to reuse those components. The more standards I have, the more that I can move to a model where I'm really just assembling content and styling, okay? On the other end of the spectrum is custom development. Every single project being custom developed. What usually happens is that customer, depending on the amount of governance in the company, the amount of standards that they have in user experience, and the amount of investment they've made into their enterprise platform, they will end up somewhere on this spectrum. Now, to use Procter & Gamble again as an example, their goal was very ambitious. On the average, and they did so many websites before they took this route, they knew that it would take them somewhere between 12 and 16 weeks to build one of these branded websites, which is not bad. Right? It's not bad. But they wanted to reduce that down to 2. And what that meant is that they had to cut out a lot of those custom development exercises. And the way that they did that is through building a very extensive platform. Now, when you do, again, the math, and you say, well, when I have 1,500 websites and I reduce my delivery time from 16 weeks down to 3 or 2, then you can see, obviously, that there's a tremendous amount of savings. Now, there's a couple things that we need to understand and we need to know. The first thing that we need to do is introduce some new terms. And I will take credit for this term, Multi-Landscape-ancy. So we know how multi-tenancy works. All right, if I deploy 2 sites into Sitecore, does Sitecore isolate those tenants for me? Does it do that? Well, you guys are all developers, you know this. No, it doesn't. So it's one application pool. All right, everything's running together. If I stick an event handler into that instance and that event handler is going to fire, I need to put some logic in it to protect it one from the other. Also on the file system, all right, I can't exactly protect one tenant from the other in terms of file system. They have the same file name in the same folder. One's going to squish the other one. Now, something to understand about this enterprise, there's 1,500 websites. Is all that going to go on one content management server? Probably not. All right, depending on the amount of content authoring that's going on, this is actually going to be scattered possibly to, again, hundreds of Sitecore servers. So we all understand what an instance is. We run this on our desktops all the time. It's great. Sitecore runs fantastically. Whenever we're deploying this to a real place, like when this is going to be launched somewhere, it's going to go into not just a single server, but more than likely it's going to go into an environment. All right, so this environment of servers right here is designated by a role, and this is a very simplistic thing. 1 content management server, 2 content delivery servers, a load balancer, maybe I'm using MongoDB, maybe I'm using Solr, maybe I'm using Coveo, maybe I'm using whatever. But all these servers that are running Sitecore are all running the same version. They're running the same patches. They're configured to work together as a unit. All right, so we refer to this as an environment. And by the way, environments are customer specific. That's a simple one, right? 3 Sitecore servers. What's the biggest environment you guys have seen in Sitecore? How big? Holy shit. Okay, I'm sorry. That's a lot. I was going to say like 15, something like that. You got me. All right, so environments can be very large. Right, they can. And I have seen some that were geographically distributed, things like that, where they can get actually significantly large. Now, when I have multiple environments, and of course I do have multiple environments because I have to do things like development, integration testing, quality assurance by the business, and then production. When I have those, I use those environments together. And all of the servers in these environments together, collectively, need to run the same Sitecore version, the same patches, the same configuration, roughly, right, with some differences for hostname mappings and things like that. All of these things together constitute what is referred to as a landscape. Has anybody heard the term landscape before? Dealing with Sitecore environments? Okay. So not necessarily a new term. So all these are running the same type, version, patches, etc. All right, so now imagine hundreds of these landscapes. Okay? So a couple of questions come up, and you have to think about this level of complexity from this client. How does a site get allocated to a landscape? Okay, so they've got to have a governance process somewhere that does it. Do I segment a specific partner to a landscape? Why would that be an advantage? Because then I keep my partners from killing each other when one of them deploys an event handler that wipes out the other one's site. All right. Do I segment specific development teams to their own landscape? Oh, that's kind of expensive. All right, I don't know if I can do that. Because if they put every single site on its own landscape, then that's going to be a lot. All right, 1,500 landscapes times 15 servers is too much. Now, some of these companies have licenses that literally allow them unlimited number of Sitecore instances. I've seen the paper. It really allows them to do that. But they can't afford to run that many. All right, it would cost a fortune. If I have this many Sitecore servers, do you think that they'll all be running the same version of Sitecore? All right, I doubt it. Because when this guy was installed, it was Sitecore 7.2. And then they moved on, or they kept moving on. They might have upgraded for a while, but once I got to about 100 landscapes, it got really hard to keep all those things in line. Because every time I upgrade Sitecore, I have to also make sure that my solution actually works across all of those different versions. And I also have to start dealing with things like solution architecture. So who's been using the Helix standard? Who's been using Habitat? Okay. Habitat has 2 ways that it works. At least I believe that I've read this, right? We don't use Habitat right now in our own solution. We have our own solution architecture. But one of them is you put all of the sites going into a landscape into the same solution. Okay, would that work here? No, that won't work, right? Because it binds all of those sites into the same delivery life cycle. If I make a change to one site, now I'm deploying everything. All right, that's a risky proposition. Plus, I need to understand that sites in an ecosystem like this need to be portable. And by portability, what I mean is if it's on landscape 87, and I start to see a lot of latency or issues because authoring requirements went up for a specific tenant, I might need to be able to move that tenant to another site. And believe it or not, you can do that, okay, as long as you have a good solution architecture. Now, we understand that this is complicated. All right, question, is it worth it? Of course it is. There's a tremendous number of projects out there from these companies. Procter & Gamble, I said, has about 1,500 websites. I believe that Honeywell has about 3 times that many that they are moving into Sitecore over time. And there's no chance that any one company, no matter how big it is going to accomplish all of that. It's going to be a mix of a bunch of different partners that they're going to be recruiting to build sites for them. Now, when you want to work with an enterprise like this, there are 2 types of projects, or actually 3 types of projects that you'll be asked to do potentially. The first one is platform development. Okay? Platform development is building that enterprise platform of services to give to other developers that are actually going to build brand websites or localizations so that they can be successful, all right? Now, in the case of this kind of platform development project, the success of a project like that is measured in how consumable that platform is by other development teams. So this is kind of like a pseudo product development thing, right? You're building a product that these development companies actually consume and utilize, which means that you're also building things like automated testing frameworks, solution scaffolding, all right? So if I'm going to allow them to start up a project, I need to be able to start it through automation. It needs to be instant. I need to be able to build things like training modules and very extensive documentation. I'm probably going to have to record some training in an LMS somewhere so that those teams, when they're onboarding, they know what to do. Now, building those tenant websites is the second type of project, and that's the ones that there's going to be, again, a lot of these projects out there. And the third type of project is a localization of a tenant website. And in some companies, those are separate types of projects, and some there are the same. But understand that there's some things that you can do if you join or if you get an opportunity to work with these companies that will ensure success. Now, you remember the triangle of doom that we saw earlier, right? So the triangle of doom was easy. That was simple. The first step is to understand the organization. Now, when you look at an organization inside of an enterprise, things again get a little more complex. So you have marketing, and marketing, by the way, might be centralized and functional, or might be mission-oriented and distributed. So I might have different marketing teams, I might have the same marketing teams. But the marketing team defines a strategy. The marketing team is also in charge of look and feel, which is delivered by creative. The marketing team, because they define strategy, they have to align with the platform services team to build the platform, because they're a stakeholder. Creative also has to align with platform services to make sure that the platform is built to deliver visually and user experience-wise exactly what the customers want. Now, the procurement team is in charge of sending out RFPs. Make friends with those people. They're very difficult. But if you make friends with them, then you'll get a lot of RFPs. But the PMO is responsible for execution. So the project management office in the enterprise defines what they refer to as project readiness, meaning is a project ready to enter the factory? Because if it doesn't have a certain amount of content ready, if design is not approved, if design is not done to the appropriate device formats, if blah, 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 then that project's going to experience a lot of operational friction. They want to stop it. So they work with procurement to make sure that projects are ready before they get into the pipeline. They also work with procurement to make sure that vendors are qualified. Then, of course, you have operations. Each project has to go through some sort of an architectural review, and it has to be supportable. So there has to be things like knowledge transfer processes, et cetera. I know this is crazy, but this is like what my life is. I swear to God, it's horrible. And you're in the middle of it. All right, so if you understand the organization, then you can, it helps. It helps tremendously. Step number 2 is to read the manual. Now, in the case of a company, again, like P&G, they have a specific technology footprint, and their enterprise platform has reliances on certain technologies. Right? I can tell you that Procter & Gamble uses Solar. They use Score. They use Sitecore. They use Bazaar Voice. They use et cetera, et cetera. So it's obviously in your best interest to understand those technologies. Who in here has done a project with Coveo? Okay. Who in here is Coveo certified? Oh, that's okay. Not a lot of people are Coveo certified. And if you went through the Coveo learning while you go process, you probably wish you could have gone back and became certified before you did it, okay? Because it's complicated. Invest the time to learn the technologies that that company has invested in. It's very important. Sometimes these companies can negotiate large deals with vendors, and they will help you make sure that your people are educated. But whatever you do, don't drop them into that project without knowing some baseline of that technology. Read the manual. Now, again, it really doesn't matter what their technology is, but you need to know it, and you need to supply people and team that have direct experience with it. Otherwise, they will fail. And then the final piece is to understand their operational model. And this is the part that a lot of teams miss. So the thing that always occurred to me in 1997 when I started BrainJocks is why projects fail. Well, a lot of the reason why projects fail is because of misalignment or a very poor operational model. If I don't challenge design early enough in the process, it becomes a commitment to the customer once they've seen it. You give them a comp, and all of a sudden that is blood. All right, it's done. All right, so you have to be able to understand a process by which you can deliver. Now, beyond learning the technology, you have to understand how they expect you to execute. Some enterprises will actually give you a prescription. They'll say, here is how you're going to execute. They'll say, whenever a project starts, you're going to be given this stuff. Okay, when you get this stuff, you're going to start by doing X and Y and Z. And here's your expectation. Some of them don't. Okay, the ones that don't, just stay away from those people. They're crazy. But you have to understand certain things. Things like how are functional tests run? How are non-functional tests run? What's a non-functional test? You guys know all that stuff? Yeah, performance, privacy, security, accessibility, all that good stuff. When's it run in the development lifecycle? How is content assembly done? Have you thought about that? If I'm developing a new site in a shared landscape with other tenants, and I'm deploying constantly, how am I keeping those other tenants from going crazy because their app pool is being recycled? And when I deploy, how do I make sure that I'm not squishing content? All right, so understand that development lifecycle. Understand how things are being delivered. It's extremely important. How is configuration managed? Okay, are they using something like Octopus Deploy? Are they using something that they did custom? You know, how are they actually doing it? Build profiles in the solution. How are they doing it? Who does the CSS? Is it done by a design partner? Is it expected to be done by our team? Ugh. Who does it? All right, so all these things, if you ask these questions early on, then you have a whole lot better chance of not sinking the ship or buzzing the buzzer guy. Did you guys play this game before? Is this totally American? Is this a European thing too? You played Operation? All right, good. I was worried about that reference. Okay, guys, that is the end of my talk. And again, my name is Brian Beckham, and I am available for questions. Thank you.
Any questions?
I don't know. You got to ask them.
Any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Nobody?
All right, guys. Oh, yes.
Do you find the standards are generally grow organically, or do people think about these things up front? Or is it?
I can tell you that a majority of these companies go in with a lot of ambition, and they inevitably fail, and they can't figure out why. All right, so they have this expectation that this is going to happen kind of automatically, and they make some dumb assumptions. You know, not their fault, they didn't know, but like P&G is actually on their second generation of platform because the first one they had did not give enough diversity to design, did not give enough operational fluidity, I guess is what you would say. Recipes, I mentioned from Kraft, is being built on its second iteration as well. And so is RFWF. So inevitably, they all go into it and fail, and they learn through that experience. I would love to explain to them beforehand, but it's really hard to do.
So does that mean that the different landscapes are also working on different sets of governance rules?
It's very possible. Yeah, it's very possible. So there's a lot of ways that Sitecore scales, all right? But the authoring environment is something that's a little bit more difficult to scale than the delivery environment. So they initially go in and they think, oh, we're going to put all of our sites into one big honking environment, something like what that guy described over there. But it doesn't work that way, right? It becomes this huge collision. All of a sudden they figure out, hey, we have 5 projects going on at once, and they're all deploying into this instance, and the thing is just recycling constantly, and it creates a lot of problems. So yeah, there usually is a process or a program where they're migrating from one platform to the next. Luckily, the recycle rate of a lot of these companies is very aggressive, right? So they rebuild these sites pretty often. So it doesn't take that long to cycle out of one technology base and into another one. Okay.
Right. I like the fact that you mentioned to get certified. I'm certified in many things that I never used, and I used a lot of things that I was never certified for. So in terms of accelerators, do you see any value on certifications as well? For example, do you guys at BrainJocks, do you offer certification for SCORE, something like that?
Yes, we do offer. We have 3 different training classes in SCORE, one for the Sitecore developers, one for the UI developers, and then a fundamentals class for content authors and just really everybody to understand the principles of page building and authoring, okay? And I think it's a must. I think that it is absolutely something that, again, you have to know, you have to read the manual, you gotta know it. Because you also have to know where the platform is extensible and where it's not. Like, where are your natural extension points and how do you use those extension points? The tricky part of the education is usually the customer's specific platform. Because customers always pay for good documentation, right? No, they don't. All right. So you have to tell them, okay, we have to document, we have to create training that is for this platform. Otherwise, companies that are coming in here and using it are going to fail. So yeah, I think it's a huge plus. Whatever technology you're using, I would definitely recommend it. Okay. Any other questions? All right, guys. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.